So let's quickly compare Objective-C to C Sharp. So at a high level, some of the general comparisons that we can make between C Sharp and Objective-C. Well, we talked about this before, but I think this is really important to understand. It uses dynamically bound methods. We're passing messages. We're not calling methods when we're using Objective-C. And that allows us to do some tricks later on. We're not going to cover in this particular module, but you need to be aware of that because if you look at someone else's Objective-C code and you're like, well, this is kind of weird. What are they doing here? You might understand it better if you realize that it's dynamically bound and you're sending messages. We talked about this before also, that Objective-C is a superset of C. But C Sharp, that's not the case. C Sharp isn't a superset of anything. It has some C++ and some C-like syntax, but you can't just call some C++ or C code. With Objective-C, you can do that. If you have a C library, you can use that. You can call methods on that. You can incorporate that right into your project, right into your code. Objective-C in iOS 4 and lower does not provide garbage collection. If you are relying on garbage collection, it's not going to work in that environment. When iOS 5 comes out, probably be out by the time this module is, and if you're developing for iOS 5, which is you may not be because you might not want to be doing that right away, then you're going to have garbage collection, and there are going to be some considerations that you're going to take into place there. But for iOS 4 and lower, it doesn't support garbage collection. In C Sharp, you have garbage collection automatically, so you don't have to worry. When you call new, you don't worry about releasing that memory. In Objective-C, you do have to worry about that. So we're just going to go and we're going to kind of hit through a bunch of the differences. Like I said before, this is going to be more of a reference for you that you can look back, and if you want to try to do something in Objective-C and you knew how to do it in C Sharp, you can go back to this reference and look at this. So creating a class in C Sharp, it's just class my class. In Objective-C, we've got to do two things. We pre-declare it in the interface, and then we provide an implementation for it, the .h, the .m file. And in Objective-C, your classes should be basically inheriting from NSObject. So using a class, we talked about this before. In C Sharp, it's very straightforward. You do the new my class. In Objective-C, remember, we declare as a pointer, and then here we're doing it all on one line. We have our declaration of the pointer to my class. We allocate it, we initialize it, we assign it to the pointer. Root object. In C Sharp, the root of all objects are object. Everything is of type object. And Objective-C, truly it's ID. All types basically are of type ID, but for all the classes that we're going to be creating and using that are the Objective-C classes, we're always going to inherit from NSObject, and everything that you use in the frameworks are going to be inheriting from NSObject. So NSObject will be the root in that case. To declare a method in C Sharp, you can see above, you should be familiar with the syntax. In Objective-C, we covered this before, but here it is again. You remember the minus is for a private level method, an instance level method, and if you used a plus, it would be for a class level method, like a static method in C Sharp. And there's the declaration one more time. And I'll say one more time, it will take your brain a little bit to get used to seeing this, but you will start recognizing these method signatures. To call a method in C Sharp, very simple. In Objective-C, also not very complex, a little more descriptive, where you have the name parameters, which I guess you can do in C Sharp 4 anyway. But in Objective-C, we're also using self here. We're wrapping it in the square brackets. Strings in C Sharp, you just have a string class. In Objective-C, we're using NSString. We can use an @ and then quotes to declare a string automatically. And remember, strings are not primitive types like they are in C Sharp, or even though they're an object in C Sharp. In Objective-C, they're truly treated like an object. They're not treated like a primitive type in many regards. So you need to allocate them. They need to take up memory. You need to have that memory for them. So for example, if you use @blah to declare a string, and then you you expect that somewhere someone needs to allocate some memory and retain that string and store it somewhere into a property or something that's going to hold on to it. Otherwise, it's going to disappear. Properties. We covered this already in C Sharp. You should be familiar with that syntax. That's an auto property with the getter and setter. In Objective-C, remember, in the .h file, we declare the property, and then in the .m file, we synthesize it to automatically create the getter and setter for it. Self-reference. In C Sharp, we use this. In Objective-C, we use the keyword self. Interfaces. In C Sharp, we use the interface keyword. In Objective-C, we use a protocol, and this, we're not going to go in depth here, but protocol basically works like an interface in C Sharp. It's going to let you define what methods need to be available in order for something to say that it implements that protocol. And that's kind of a useful thing to do. Just this, you would use that almost exactly the same way you use interfaces in C Sharp. So let's look at extending a class. In C Sharp, you're familiar with extension methods, and in Objective-C, we use categories. And categories actually add methods right onto a class, very similar to how extension methods work in C Sharp, except remember that in Objective-C, they're truly being added onto the class because they're dynamically bound. Inclusion. In C Sharp, we do an import statement, and in Objective-C, we do a pound include just like we would do in C. And for the quote is for your files. If you do the angle brackets around the include, that'll be for base library files, just like in C and C++. Delegation. In C Sharp, you can use a delegate or a lambda expression to do delegation. In Objective-C, there's a couple of ways. What they define as delegation is different than kind of how it's defined in C Sharp. But to do the same thing functionally, in Objective-C, we use selectors. And that's kind of an advanced topic, but I give you a little bit of the syntax here, this set action cell selector. And what that is basically doing is allowing you to say, okay, when this message gets passed, send it here. This is who's going to respond to this message, and that allows you to do delegation. But just so you know that the delegation does exist in Objective-C, and that's more of an advanced topic, and we'll probably cover that in a more advanced Objective-C course.